Shalom, friends. In this week's Torah portion of Vayeshev, he dwelt, we find Jacob and the family settling into life in the Promised Land. Things going in a kind of an ordinary fashion until a series of events trigger what will be their own salvation. And of course, the steps to that salvation are beyond their imagining. We read in Genesis chapter 37 and verse 15, Vayimtzeyehu ish vahine toeh basadeh. And a man found him. He found him wandering, meandering, lost in a field. And of course, this is Joseph, who has been sent by Jacob to inquire as to how his brothers are doing, who are out in a field tending to the flocks of the family. And when Joseph arrives at the place that he expects them to be, they're not there. And the Torah paints this picture that he's actually, wandering in circles within this open space until a man who seemingly appears out of nowhere says, "Hey, what are you doing?" "I'm looking for my brothers." To which the man says, "Listen, they've moved on to Dothan. You'll find them there." And he sends them on his way. See, earlier in the chapter, Joseph reveals that he has had a series of dreams in which his family appears to bow to him. And this is, of course, an unthinkable scenario. There's no circumstance in which they could imagine this ever happening, except for Joseph, because he's had the dream. But the older brothers and the father and the mother bowing to the second youngest son, it's unthinkable. But all of these little events take place that lead them to that eventuality, where that scene that they think is unthinkable is actually a revelation of their very lives being saved. I wonder if any of us can look back in our life and think of a moment, maybe in passing, where someone, unbeknownst to us, pointed us in the right direction. It doesn't have to be a literal direction, but there was a moment of kindness, a moment of wisdom, a moment of insight, a moment of intervention that someone actually put us on the right track to where we needed to be. I can think of several people, and one in particular, more than a decade and a half ago, who just in a moment of passing, actually sent me in the direction that I needed to go. And I didn't know it, they didn't know it, because they were in reality an angel that was unknown to me and unknown to them. They were in the right place at the right time. We would call it just a circumstance, a happenstance, when in reality it was a divine appointment. I think we need to recognize that every moment in life is significant because we're alive, we're living. There's moments when the interaction between two humans can lead to some fantastic things. And if we're seeking the Lord and being attentive to His will and His ordering in our life, we'll recognize, usually many years later, that the most simple interaction with another human being, a moment in time, actually sent us off to Dothan, just like it did for Joseph. We don't know who this man is, but without this man pointing the way, seeing him wandering, and just saying, "Hey, where are you going?" That simple question. Joseph needed to get to where he was going. He needed to go to his brothers. His brothers needed to sell him into slavery. He needed to find favor in prison. He needed to be raised to the position of viceroy, which never would have happened unless a man stopped and said, "How can I help you?" Friends, it's only in retrospect, and in many cases, we're not going to know how a moment in our life or a moment where we were invested in someone else's life sends them on the way to where they needed to be. There are so many examples of this that I can draw from reading and history and personal experience. But the most beautiful moment is the Lord leaves this story in here, this moment in here, to say, no moment is ordinary. Every moment is extraordinary when you accept it and receive it in faith. So keep our eyes open. We need to keep our eyes open for these moments where we might be found by someone when we are wandering along the way. Because heaven forbid, Joseph had returned to his father's house and missed the way he needed to go. Shabbat Shalom. Amen.